Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology, and First Daily Mormon History Podcast. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to continue our conversation with Pastor Brittany Mangelson for the Community of Christ here in Salt Lake City. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about the open baptism policy in the Community of Christ, as well as how one gets ordained in the Community of Christ. We'll also talk a little bit about some Wasatch Front congregations, so you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. So I guess you don't have to get baptized because Community of Christ recognizes pretty much all other baptisms as long as the person was at least 8.
Correct. Yeah. Baptism, 8 years old, having water, a Christian baptism. So yeah.
So sprinkling's still okay.
I mean, I think so. If it happened after 8, I think the criteria are 8 years old, water, and a Christian baptism. So yeah.
And I know both you and I attended World Conference for the first time. Mm-hmm. I was surprised it was your first.
Well, this last one was actually my third World Conference.
Oh,
but yeah.
I thought it was your first for some reason. But there was a resolution there in conference that said, hey, First Presidency, we'd like you to reconsider this 8-year-old criteria because in Europe especially, most people were baptized as infants, and they don't want to go through rebaptism to join the Community of Christ.
Correct. Yeah.
And so do you see that changing? Because basically the resolution was, First Presidency, just please consider our request, right?
Yeah. So I think that in Community of Christ, all cards are on the table, like at all times. We are very open to going where we feel God is calling us to go. And I have only seen those steps be taken to further include. So it's not necessarily a short, easy fix of, like making changes. A lot of these changes are long haul. But this is a very deep theological question, right? So what is the purpose of baptism? Does an 8-year-old really have autonomy to make decisions more than an infant? I mean, these are all questions that we have to theologically go through. What does baptism mean in discipleship and Community of Christ? So I absolutely could see it changing. I think that there are theological, we have a theological team that goes through a lot of these questions that get raised at World Conference. So I have no doubt that the First Presidency is taking that into consideration and listening to, all sides of the conversation. Anyone can just email Steve Veazey or whoever, leadership they want.
Stacey Cram now.
Stacey Cram, yes. So yeah, the First Presidency is open to conversation, I would say. There is, we try to be equal in how we give those conversations, right? So there is, we follow Robert's Rules of Order. We're not just like this chaotic, everybody's opinion can just be thrown out there. And that would be really overwhelming. So
it's very parliamentarian.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, I can absolutely see it changing. I don't have strong opinions either way.
Some people
really
do,
don't.
though.
Yeah.
I was really surprised to hear the several Community of Christ members get up and say, hey, well, we're teaching our children that you got to be 8 to be baptized. Is it fair that this 5-year-old can take communion when the 8-year-old can't? And so there were some really strong opinions on both sides.
Yeah.
You don't see that in the LDS Church.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most fascinating comments that I have ever experienced at World Conference was the gentleman that brought up, the prophet Nephi and the prophet Joseph Smith, that he was saying, or the prophet Moroni, I don't even know, but it was like he was using the Book of Mormon to show that the age of 8, accountability, and that was like backing up his opinion that he didn't want this to be changed. And that was fascinating for me. I sit on the communications team, so I was up in the little tech booth, and one of my colleagues is not Community of Christ. She attends a different church and doesn't have a restoration background at all. And she was just like, who is he talking about? it was such a fascinating, cultural mashup.
This person sitting in the communications booth with you and is not a member of your church?
Yeah, she designs. Yeah, and she's on the Herald, our magazine team. So she does the layout. She does a lot of editing, actually. So yeah, copywriting. So yeah, she's not a member of Community of Christ, and we're like,
pretty different.
Welcome. Yeah, yeah, it is. Well, and our principal pianist, organist, Jan Craybill, is not a member of Community of Christ either.
Here in Salt Lake?
No, she's an independent.
Okay.
And we actually had her on Project Zion to talk about that. I interviewed her, and she had said that policy of not accepting baptisms under the age of 8 was a big hang-up for her because she was baptized as an infant, and she doesn't want to erase that. And I mean, she went on, record very publicly years ago saying that was a huge stumbling block for her joining Community of Christ. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Can you remind me when that policy of not needing to be rebaptized came in? Because that's pretty recent, isn't it?
Yes, and I am definitely an amateur historian, so I do not have an actual date.
But within the last 20 years,
yes,
probably?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was under the leadership of Grant McMurray.
Okay.
But I could be wrong about that.
Or the prophet president before Steve Veazey.
Yeah.
Okay. And he was the first non-Smith prophet.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, very interesting. So if a person does want to join Community of Christ, as long as they were baptized after 8, that baptism is considered valid, whether it's Anglican or whatever, Protestant, LDS, it doesn't matter. But then you do have a confirmation process.
Correct.
Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So the confirmation process looks very similar to it in the LDS Church, right? You have the candidate, you have 2 ministers who give a prayer of confirmation. I think a big difference is, and maybe this isn't even that big of a difference, but it usually happens in a very public setting. So all of our sacraments or ordinances in LDS terms happen publicly. So since Christmas, we have had 3 confirmations in the Salt Lake congregation, and all of them have happened just in the middle of a church service on a Sunday morning. All of them did not choose to be baptized, so they chose to join by confirmation only. But we do have a really beautiful baptismal font. I ended up getting rebaptized into Community of Christ.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's a choice, and I would say maybe 50-50 from what I've seen for people that join from the LDS Church, choose to get rebaptized, and then the other 50% just choose to be confirmed. So.
Oh, it's about half and half. That's
I mean, that's not scientific, stats, but from what I've observed, that seems about right. Maybe leaning slightly to the confirmation only side in recent years. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know John Hamer has talked about that in some interviews about people don't want to erase their LDS baptism. And so it's nice. And then you just mentioned this woman who, that's a big deal. She doesn't want to get rebaptized.
Yeah.
And so that's very interesting. Now, I know typically for an adult male, let's say, in the LDS Church, within a week or 2, they're ordained to the priesthood. How does that process work in Community of Christ?
Yeah, so it's totally different. And that has caused, I don't want to say issues, but it's something that people have to work through. So in Community of Christ, ordination is not automatic. It does not progress in the same way. You don't start out as deacon and then become a teacher and then become a priest and then become an elder. I've heard statistics of anywhere between 10 and 25, 30% of the church is ordained. So it's kind of this model, if you were to walk into, say, the Anglican Church, it's not like every adult in the congregation is ordained, right? They have clergy. So it's kind of a mix between that and then the LDS model of, not being as trained as like an Anglican priest. So it's kind of this weird, funky middle ground of, kind of this grassroots, more casual, relaxed model of priesthood, and then also just not an automatic where it goes out to everybody. So Priesthood calls that would be deacon, teacher, elder, priest come from the pastor. So the pastor is looking at the congregation and is looking at the needs of the congregation and can call priesthood from that group. There are, in the Salt Lake congregation, we have a small handful that are ordained. And we do a lot of work. It's in Community of Christ, it's kind of more as a calling, not just an automatic thing. And I use air quotes because I think our LDS listeners will understand the concept of a calling, right? So you get assigned to do something, you get invited to do something, to live out your ministry in a very specific way. And that's similar to calling in Community of Christ, priesthood calling. So my job as an elder is very specific. I'm supposed to be over administrative roles. I'm supposed to be community building, being invitational, welcoming people in, presiding, leading the congregation. I started out as a priest, and that priesthood office is totally different. It's very relational. It's not necessarily being, the quote unquote leader in the same way as an elder is, but it's about personal relationships within the congregation, modeling Jesus as a friend. And, the teacher is Jesus's peacemaker. So very much into peacemaking, getting the community out in the world and doing the work of justice and peacemaking, conflict resolution within the congregation. So it's totally normal to have a 50-year-old be a teacher and, get called as a teacher as an adult and be a teacher their entire life.
So this isn't like a Sunday school teacher. It's more like a home teacher.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. And, in the LDS Church, if you were to say, what's the office of a teacher, it would be, the preparatory office that we give 14-year-olds, to then become a priest, and then to become an elder. So there's a natural progression. It's kind of seen as a stepping stone. Whereas in Community of Christ, I've said this a lot, but I think the office of the teacher is what the world needs the most of. We need more peacemakers. We need more people who can build bridges and reconciliation and find middle grounds to be able to communicate. We're so polarized in society, and I see the office as a teacher of the most importance right now. Unfortunately, we don't have any teachers in Salt Lake, but
oh, really?
Yeah, we don't.
Oh, I'm surprised.
But it's tricky though, right? Because me as a pastor, approaching, someone who's served as an elder in the LDS Church, and I say, hey, I really feel like, you have a call to be a teacher. That can be offensive. It's
like a demotion.
Yes. And it's a cultural mashup, and, where priesthood in the Salt Lake congregation has been really tricky to figure out because there's so much cultural baggage that comes with it. And so how do you frame the office of the teacher as the most important? Again, this is my opinion, but I really do think it's like the most important ministry that we can have. But how do you convince somebody that it's not a demotion, right? That's hard.
Because what percentage of the Salt Lake congregation are former LDS?
Everybody but one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
and so we have
because Carla was the pastor before you, right? Mm-hmm. And she's lifelong Community of Christ.
Yeah. So, and I want to be careful how I say this too, because we do have, when somebody steps away from Community of Christ, it's usually not like a really dramatic, like I'm resigning my membership. Sometimes it is. So we absolutely have people who are still around, who are lifelong members, who have attended the Salt Lake congregation. But currently on a Sunday morning, there's one person.
Wow.
We've had a few others that have, gone to the Ogden congregation. And then, we had Carla and Kuzma for a while. We've had Blair and Denise White, but they've all moved back east again. So, last Sunday we had one. So we're all former LDS.
And I didn't know you had an Ogden congregation. You've got a Provo congregation, but it's really small, probably only meets every other week.
They actually now do meet every week. Yeah, they meet at St. Mary's Episcopal. But they're small. And so is our Ogden congregation too. They both, any Sunday, are usually 20 max, but usually, 10, 15.
Okay. And your Salt Lake congregation, from what I understand, I've talked with Deb Luce. She's I like to call her a matriarch. She hates that, but she's an evangelist. She would be the LDS equivalent of a patriarch. But she says most congregations are 50 or less.
Yeah, that's
and
pretty
Salt
typical.
Lake, you probably have, 100 or so?
Well, so again, this is tricky, right? Last Easter, we had 96.
Okay.
And I was overwhelmed because we also had a big breakfast and an Easter egg hunt, and we were just flooded with people. We probably have 150 that orbit around us. And, when you leave the LDS church attendance is going to look different. So we have a lot of friends of the congregation that if we were just to disappear, we would have 150 people that would miss us, that we, would be devastated that our space didn't exist. We do not have 150 people every Sunday. So this last Sunday, we were about 40. Yeah. But again, sometimes we're 60, sometimes we're 70. And then
I always come on the big days because I know at Sunstone, they're always like, hey, come
well over
meet
100.
us. Yeah. And so that I've always, because I've been 2 or 3 times, I guess twice was for Sunstone. And then the other time was for a baptism of your son, I believe it was.
Yep.
And that seemed like it was Sunstone styles crowd.
Yeah. So it can be tricky being in leadership, right? Because you don't know, am I going to have 30 people show up or am I going to have 100 people show up? And those are 2 very big numbers, especially when, if 3 families come, 3 Utah-sized families come, now all of a sudden we have 20 kids. And so I very distinctly remember last year, I teach the kids in our congregation, and there were 27 under 11. So we usually do, a 5 to 11 class. So we don't have enough kids to have every year be its own class. And I was just like, SOS, we need 5 other adults in here. There's literally almost 30 kids. But then other times it's just my son and, 2 or 3 other families bring their kids. So sometimes, we're under 10 kids and you just literally never know. So you have to prepare for everything. I'm on my toes a lot. And you just have to learn to pivot because you just don't know. Yeah.
Well, interesting. I've also noticed in the few times I've attended do you call it a sacrament meeting?
Worship, but
your worship service, which is like sacrament meeting. Although you only do it once a month, right?
Yeah.
Sacrament?
Communion is done once a month. Yeah.
Okay.
Sacrament communion.
And then and maybe, I don't know, maybe my experience isn't typical. It seems like you always spend 10 or 15 minutes where someone, it has been you though, will speak directly to the children.
Yeah.
And is that every week?
Yeah. That's
what I thought.
And sometimes if we accidentally forget to do that, or we have activity bags for the kids that we usually pass out at the end of that little children's focus moment, they get so mad and they're like, Brittany, you forgot about us.
It's not Elder Brittany.
No. Yeah. So, and I think it's important, right? I mean, I think that in Community of Christ, we're pretty good at including kids.
Right.
We have kids who are at the pulpit almost every week and they're doing readings. We collect the offering in the middle of the service. So that's also, if we, accidentally ask an adult to do that, we have a handful of kids that are like, excuse me, that's my job. They, go around the trays.
That's not a deacon's job.
No, it's our 5-year-old's job just because they've claimed it, right? So yeah, the kids, I love that the kids feel like this is their congregation. We have a little 7-year-old right now who is just chomping at the bit to be baptized. And I've had to, try to explain the age of 8 thing to her. And she's just like, I don't care. This is my church. I want to join. So I'm like, okay, talk to your mom. So yeah, the kids are really, really invested. And I love it because I think how my life would have been different if I would have seen leadership really include me as a kid and not just kind of seen, as an add-on or something to be dealt with. But we really try to include our kids in every aspect of the community. So that definitely includes, everybody come up, what time it is. And we usually do a little story or whatever the little focus moment is, and then we send them off with a treat. That's another thing. If there's not a treat in the activity bags, I hear about it for weeks. So the kids hold us accountable for sure.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Brittany Mangelson, the Salt Lake pastor of the Community of Christ. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about the role of deacons, teachers, and priests, as well as 70s in the Community of Christ.
Yeah, so I know that I did say that I think that the role of teacher is like, quote unquote, the most important. They're all equally important. I just really think that peacemaking and reconciliation is needed in the world today. But the ministry of the deacon is also super important. The ministry of the deacon in Community of Christ, they are over hospitality. So making sure that the building is in functioning condition.
Activities committee?
The space. Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. How do we make the physical space work, right? So they also work with bishops.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt. So check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.